All right, thanks. If you want to tell us a little bit about your background for anyone who doesn't already know, that would be great.
Oh boy. I don't know how far you want me to go, so I'll just
As
say
far
it.
as you want, Chris.
Oh boy. Well, when I was born, I'm just kidding. No, that's probably too far. Let's see. I was a operations manager for offensive security, and I was training in exploit writing, and I sucked at coding really bad. Um, just not good at it. Can't remember stuff. So whenever we had a pen test, all the guys would be writing exploits and doing the fun stuff, and then I would make a phone call and get a password, and it worked, but I didn't know why. I had no clue. Like it just was like magic, like some kind of voodoo. So that irritates me. Anyone who's in the hacker mindset, when something works, you kind of want to understand why. I wanted to be able to duplicate it, and I couldn't. So I started reading books on everything: psychology, nonverbal communications, influence, rapport, manipulation, everything I can get my hands on. And I started to see, oh, this is what I was doing. I didn't know why it worked. Now I'm going to go try it on purpose, and it would work. So after months and months of that, I went back to my boss and I said, we should write a course on this thing, this social engineering thing. Because at the time, there was nothing. Like if you went on the internet and typed in social engineering, you got like how to pick up girls and how to get free burgers from McDonald's, and that was it. And then some stories about Kevin Mitnick, but there wasn't anything really about our industry there. So he said, well, if you want to write a course, you got to write a framework first. So I wrote the framework, which is still alive today. Of course, we've updated it and enhanced it, but it's on social-engineer.org. About a month after that came out, Kevin Mitnick's publisher called me and asked me to write a book, which I laughed and said, no, I'm not an author. I'm just a hacker. And I thought it was funny because I'm like, that's, not something I ever wanted to do. And I was telling my guys at work, that I got this phone call and they're all like, you're a moron. Call her back and tell her to write the book. So I did, and that was my first book, Social Engineering: The Art of Human Hacking, which is terrible. If you haven't read that book, you should definitely avoid it and not read it. It's got a lot of unscientific crap in it, and it's just not great. It's like 12 years old at this point. So let's see. Then after that, that's when I started to really understand there was some science behind this. So I had a chance to write. Well, actually, before that, that book launched. Even though it's bad now, that book is what launched my company. So it was shortly after that I started getting a lot of offers to do consulting, and now we're here. We are 11 years later. I'm running a company with 20 something employees doing only social engineering, if you can believe that.
I believe it because I'm reading this book. It's amazing. Is okay. So was your first book really bad, or are you just like,
No, it's bad.
like a musician who doesn't play their old stuff because
Okay,
it's.
let me tell you how bad it is. I quoted Wikipedia 3 times in that book. That's
Oh,
how bad that book is. Yeah. And somehow that made it past my editors and my publisher and everybody. And there's also a section in it on, hopefully, I'm not going to offend anyone here, but on NLP, which has been scientifically disproven about 18,000 times in the last like decade. There's just so much science behind showing why it doesn't work and why it's not scientific. I mean, it's kind of like you can't explain scientifically why magic works, but it works. It's great. But it's not. It's more of an art than it is a scientific skill. And when I was trying my hardest to put science behind social engineering, so it can be duplicatable, right? Because not everybody can duplicate art. I mean, we've probably all sat through those classes where there's somebody teaching you how to paint a scene, and you're all painting the same exact scene. I mean, I've done this a dozen times, and everyone in the room's scene looks completely different. It's because art is subjective. You can try to copy someone else, but science is duplicatable. If you take a scientific algorithm, it's always going to come out to the same thing if you got science. So I wanted to create or help understand the science behind why we get hacked as humans. Now, you take that for like 11 years, right? So I wrote my second book with Dr. Ekman, which was maybe my greatest life achievement. I don't care if anyone reads that book. That, like, for me was, I could have just quit, died, been done. That was okay with me. That was an amazing experience. And then I wrote 2 more books after that. And then from that experience, I started to have this situation where people were coming to my training and my classes that had nothing to do with InfoSec. I had salespeople, psychologists, stay-at-home parents. I had a Zumba instructor, and every time I would go like, "Why are you here? Like, what are you doing in this class?" And it would always be something like, "Oh, my friend in IT took this, and he said I needed to be here because it was amazing." And I would stay in touch with these students afterward and be like, how are you using the skills, and get these amazing stories from their life. And I had a couple that, this is just so weird for me to say out loud. We talk about communications profiling in the class, and it saved their marriage. Like, they were on the brink of divorce. He came to the class. He saw what he was doing wrong. He went home, and his wife talked. They both took the disc test, and they stayed married. It was like, that was not the intention of my class at all. So that gave birth to the idea of this book, the book that we're talking about today, was, can we use the skills that I've used for the last 12 years, breaking into buildings, phishing people, vishing people? Can we take those skills and make it for the masses, where they can use them every day for non-malicious intent, and leaving people feeling better for having met you? So that was the concept I had, and it was just selling it to someone. And I finally found an agent that was like, I can bite on that. And then he sold it to HarperCollins. So here we are, amazingly enough. As I
That's
just doesn't
awesome.
seem like a real story, you know?
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. From the first few chapters of the book, I think my favorite of your little anecdotal backstories was the one where you just like talked your way into being a chef. Because that just is insane to me. Like,
Yeah.
obviously you knew how to cook at least a little bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just still think that's like a really hard thing to just walk your way into doing. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It blew my mind.
So I was raised Italian American, right? Most of my family immigrated from Italy to New York. And one of the things, anyone here is Italian and American, you know that a male never leaves the home without learning how to cook, sew, and iron. Those are the three things. If you're an Italian male, you better learn those three things. Now, you're told by your Italian grandmother you'll never have to do them if you find a good wife. I know that's not very like current terms, but you better know how to do them, right? So knowing how to cook was just a part of the family, right? But I would get bored at jobs really easy. I mean, I was a lawn cutter, a window cleaner. I was a vice landlord for an apartment complex. I made surfboards. I was a lifeguard. I was a salesperson. Like, I would, at one point I was an international negotiator for stainless steel in China and India. I don't even understand that concept. I know that's another whole story. But I was driving down the road, and I was recently unemployed, and I saw this sign that said, sous chef wanted. And I'm like, I could probably do that. So I walked into the place and said to the guy, "Hey, I'm here about the job for the chef." And he's like, "Well, do you have a resume?" I'm like, "You don't need a resume." I said, "Look, we can sit here for hours and go back and forth, talk about who has what qualifications, where did I learn this, where did I learn that." I said, "But if I cook you something, you're going to be saying hi to your next chef." And that was really arrogant, right? I mean, it was a terrible way to approach it. I would not suggest anyone doing that. That is not my style now. And he said, "Okay." So I cooked him a Thai dish that I knew from my wife. My wife's from Thailand, and her mother owned a few restaurants there, so she taught me how to cook Thai food. And he hired me on the spot. So for 2 years, I knew nothing about being a chef. My first day on the job, he says, "Hey, I need you to julienne these carrots." I have no clue what the term julienne means, right? So I'm like, you know what, chef? Everybody does julienne a little bit different, and I don't want to disappoint you. So why don't you show me just like a half a carrot, and then I'll copy what you do. And that's how I learned everything. I would ask him to just show me one thing, and then I'd be like, "That's julienne." And at night I'd be going home, and now this is dating myself, but they're like, the internet was, just brand new, and I'm researching recipes and how to cook stuff and how do you poach an egg, and I'm practicing on my family. Yeah, that was 2 years of being a chef.
I feel like it takes a
That was
certain
fun.
a certain individual to be able to like think that quick though, to feel like I'll just ask him how to do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
is this a New Yorker mindset, right? Also, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things that you've pulled off that are probably like specific to
Yeah.
your personality type.
I think if I look back at um, my life history and careers, let's say, I could see why I ended up where I am now doing what I'm doing. but I didn't know that at the time, right? It's not like, some people like had a path, like they said, oh, I want to be a veterinarian. So then they love pets their whole life. They loved animals. They go to school for that. They study for that. That's like their whole existence. And then they become it. I didn't know what I wanted to be. So I tried my hand at everything. And when I got bored, I would create another job for myself or find another job. I mean, there would be times I was at a job for like a matter of weeks and then get bored and just go find something else. And if I didn't know how to do it, I would just learn it. I would go read a book and then I'd be like, I'm going to go do this thing. And then I would just read a book and be like, now I can do it. That works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. I wasn't good at everything. That's for sure. I really wasn't great at selling software. I tried my hand at that for about 6 months, and that was horrific. That was an epic fail. But I learned a lot from my failures too. But when I look back at all of those experiences, I see now why I enjoy what I do now. I was like 17 and I walked into this apartment complex. I was a paper delivery boy. So not newspaper, but like accounting papers. And I delivered stuff for people, and I'm delivering this packet of accounting papers to this apartment complex. And I walk in the office and it is like 4 feet thick of cigarette smoke. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? This guy's sitting at his desk and he really looks like he's about to hurt himself. Like, I got worried. So I said, are you okay, man? And he's like, nah, I'm going through a nasty divorce and all of this stuff. And he just starts pouring his life out to me. Like, I'm 17. I was just like, hey, what's up kind of thing. And he starts telling me his whole life story. So as he's talking, and I know this sounds so terrible, but I start seeing a job opportunity. So I'm like, hey, man, I got a great idea. So why don't you go back to Wisconsin, fix your marriage, fix your relationship with your daughter, and let me run this place for you. And he's like, what relevant experience do you have? I'm like, it doesn't matter. I mean, all I got to do is like, what, change some toilets out, like collect rent for you. Come on, I can do that. I mean, I've been a tenant. I said, I could be the landlord, right? And he's like, okay, let's give it a try. Let's give it a try, right? So I'm 17 years old and I got this like ridiculous salary for running a 25-unit apartment complex. He goes back to Wisconsin, fixes his family, calls me, and he says, I'm not coming back. I need to sell that. And I'm like, I could sell an apartment complex for you. He's like, have you ever done real estate? So I'm like, no, I can figure it out. So I go and I sell the place. I'm thinking they're going to keep me because I'm really that good. I was pretty stupid when I was young, and they didn't. They fired me. So I sold myself out of a job, But yeah, it's like I look back at those experiences, and I'm like, all of that set me up for what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to think fast on my feet when we're breaking in a building and we get caught, constantly having to come up with something new and fresh that, that doesn't get you shot or arrested.
Right. So as you mentioned that, you mentioned Mitnick earlier. Did you know much about him before you got into all this, or like, what are your thoughts there? I can tell some polar opposite tendencies that I think you both have, like very different in your style, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? Like, did you look up to him early on as a hacker?
Yeah.
Or not so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin was like one of those people that anyone in the space knew who he was. And he was like the godfather of understanding how this could be used. Now, of course, he did it maliciously. So it's not the greatest example. And I wanted to never go to prison. So, that was not something I wanted to emulate. And then I got to know Kevin, and there is a stark contrast, and I can't imagine what being stuck in solitary confinement for a year does to a human brain. I mean, I'm quarantined with my family now, and that's hard enough. I can't imagine, and I don't mean that bad against my family. I mean, just like I'm used to being a social person. Like we go to cons all the time and meet other people, and I'm here with my family now for like a year. It's been since last February. We haven't left the house, and that feels horrible. And I have a great house with I live in Florida. I have a pool. I have a nice yard, whatever. That feels bad. I can't imagine solitary confinement. So there's definitely some, maybe in the past, some social awkwardness. But, what Kevin did is he took his experience in doing illegal things and he turns it into a way to consult for other people and, and help them. I don't know if he does a lot of SE anymore for work. I think he does pen testing a lot. So the thing that I couldn't do is like when I started looking into this, Kevin's books at the time were all about his exploits and what he did. and that didn't help me with understanding the how-to and the science. And if you ever get to meet Kevin and talk to him, you kind of understand that this was something he just like born knowing how to do. He just did it and can't really explain it. Like I saw him do fishing calls before and be like, explain that to me. And he can't. He does it. He flips the switch and he becomes the other person. And I'm not that way. I wasn't born this way. I had to learn everything that I did. So my approach to it is I want to understand how I can teach others to learn what I did without having to go through the decades of experiences I went through. So can we shortcut that? And that was the motivation to try to find science to back it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. My next question is, how many times have you talked yourself into a first class ticket on a plane?
Okay, so that story in the book, since then we've tried it 6 times and it worked 4 out of 6 times.
Okay, that's a pretty good amount.
Yeah, it's not a bad close ratio for what it is. But the times that it didn't work was because my wife couldn't find anything to connect with the person behind the counter about.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that person really was having a rough day, and telling them that their makeup was good was going to be a lie, or they weren't wearing any. And we have a rule about it when we're doing these things. You can't lie. Everything has to be truthful, because if you're using this for non-pen testing purposes, then our rule has to be, you got to be honest. Lying about it makes it malicious. So when she can't find something, then we know it's going to fail. Like we're walking up to the counter and she's like, I have nothing. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll try. Maybe it will work, and it doesn't, but 4 out of 6, we got upgrades.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
For the questions that you state in the book about, every time you meet a person, you ask, who is this? How long is this going to take? So on and so forth. Where did you come up with those? I mean, did you get that from another source, or?
So what's interesting is I started to analyze failures in approaching techniques. So approaching a complete stranger trying to start a conversation, and it wouldn't work, and analyzing the rejections that I would get, and then going back and kind of writing that out and saying, that person rejected me because they really didn't understand what I wanted from the conversation quick enough. And then another person, I remember this incident altogether. I had walked into a coffee shop and my target was there, and she was a smaller female, and I walked up behind her way too close and said, "Hey, can I ask you a quick question?" And she reeled back in fear. And I understood at that moment my failure was I didn't let her know I was a non-threat. It was my approach, my height, my stature, all against her being 5'1" and tiny, and my approach was completely wrong. So I came up with these 4 things, and then I was training with Robin Dreek, who was he's retired now, but he was a director of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, and he had come up with a couple from his work and doing asset recruitment for. He was like a spy recruiter, and we combined them and made these four things that people are often wanting to have answered before they'll agree to working with you. And I find that whenever I can do that in the first sentence of my pretext, that it always goes so much better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, similar to, I guess, the story you told about the old lady, and she dropped her wallet and you were just giving it back, and she freaked out.
Oh man, I really freaked her out. She was, yeah, I almost got shot that day. So.
Oh, yikes. I do have a question. So I know it's when you're talking about the like going up to a stranger, and you discuss some like ideas on how to practice that. Do you have any strategies and ideas to practice that in the world we live in presently with the pandemic? Like, I'm not cool when people like come up and just talk to me because I'm like, you're within 6 feet and you're freaking me out. So I don't know if you have any more, not even more practical, just like examples of how you would maybe suggest doing that these days.
Yeah.
With a mask on and everything, you can't see half of people's face.
I know it is freaky. So I think in today's day and age, we could take it in 2 different sectors. So both digital and then in person. And in person, you really need to be more self-aware than ever before. And I mean that in the sense of, like, for me, knowing that I'm 6'3", I'm not a small guy. I really need to be self-aware at my proximity and at, what mask am I wearing? Like, I have a mask here I love to wear, right? So hang on. It's the Hulk, right? Now, he just looks angry all the time. It's just like this big angry face, right? And that doesn't, like, look at that. That does not make people feel better for having met you. And I used to wear this everywhere, and people would look at you, and I could be smiling behind this thing. It doesn't matter, but they don't know, because all you got is this angry green guy looking at you in the face. So I switched to, like, the normal N95 masks, which work much better, because it's like, oh, I care about you. I'm wearing an actual filtered mask. I think understanding your self-awareness with also, where am I and what are my goals in this conversation, right? And I think understanding that is the first stage to this, because if I was approaching you, Casey, it would be very important that I did it non-verbally from a non-aggressive way, and that I clearly had a reason for approaching you, right? So you're standing in the store, and let's say you're holding your phone. I'm going to guess you have an iPhone, maybe. I have an Android. iPhone? No? You have an
I have
Android?
an Android. It's a Google
Okay.
Pixel.
So,
I was
okay,
like, no,
you have
I don't have an
you
iPhone.
have a Pixel. Okay, great. So that's what I have, right?
Okay.
So I'm gonna walk up to you and say something like, "Oh, hey, you got the new Pixel. Mine's like the 2. Like, is there anything better about yours? Because I was just thinking of upgrading, but man, that $800 is gonna kill me." So now I have a reason for approaching you, right? Which is, I'm asking for your help, and as long as I don't do it aggressively, like come right up to you, so you have to do this when you're looking at me because I'm towering over you, boxing you into a corner, which would make you feel threatened, right? And as long as I maybe approach it with those 4 things in mind, like, I don't know your name, right? So I say, hey, I'm curious. I'm just shopping here, but I saw you have the same phone as me, but yours is newer. I was just thinking of upgrading. I don't know if I really want to swallow that bill. Are there any features that yours has from the previous one that you think are worth it? Now I gave you all 4 of those things, right? Who am I? I'm a guy that wants info about the phone. What do I want? I want info about the phone. Am I a threat? Well, hopefully non-verbally I can prove to you that I'm not. And then how long will this take? Well, I said I'm just shopping here. So there's an inherent time constraint by saying that we're going to part ways. I'm not asking you to, come to my car and have a conversation. So those 4 things, if I do that with self-awareness, saying I'm going to approach this tiny little female, and I'm this big person, I better do this in a different way so I'd make you feel more comfortable. I think that's the first stage of it. And most people approach conversations only viewing what it is that I want out of it. So your needs, wants, or desires are generally second place. And that is one of the biggest problems in communications today. Digitally, it's a little different. See, digitally at this point, like for the 4 of us that are on camera, I can't see from mid-chest or below. So I have no clue non-verbally what's going on with your hips, with your feet, with your hands, unless you bring them up. I have no clue non-verbally what's going on. So there is so much less input in communications digitally than ever, and we're doing everything this way, right? And then you have, like, I have a Dell that I use. I said that really like I had animosity. I didn't mean it that way. I have a Dell that I use that has the camera in the dumbest location. It is in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen.
What?
So if I'm using that computer,
I've
yeah,
seen
I
those
know,
and
right?
they're
Like,
really
what the
weird,
heck?
and I'm like, why?
It's so weird. So if I put that laptop here on my desk and I have a meeting with you, you are just staring straight up my nose. That's it, right? So you have to stage it. You have to put the on boxes or on a couple books so it's staged in a way. Yeah, right. Okay, there. Alan has one. Your fingers, you can't type on the thing while you're on there because all you're seeing is fingers. It is the most idiotic location for that. But it comes back to the same thing, Casey, which is self-awareness. And if I'm aware of my camera, my position, what I'm doing, what I'm trying to get across to you, then it will make it easier for me to communicate with you. Now, that sounds like a lot of pressure on people because then I can see everyone is now adjusting themselves because I just said all of this. And I don't mean to do that to make anyone uncomfortable. It's about me doing this for myself when I'm about to communicate with someone to know that I can do that appropriately. And then from there, it's just about communication profiling the person so you know how to answer them and ask questions. And then active listening is going to be great whether you're doing this digitally or in person. Something we also kind of fail at a little bit in this society right now, sadly.
Those were awesome pointers for the things, and I agree about the active listening. So
it's hard. It's hard because we're constantly, I think pauses make people feel awkward nowadays. You know, when my dad brought home the first computer that he ever had, there was no hard drive in it. They used these giant disks, and I remember being very young. He invited all of his friends over. He was an accountant, and he was showing his friends how they can do the taxes. And I remember him saying, when I hit this button in 45 minutes, your taxes will be done. And they were like, oh my God, no, that's not true. And he hit the button. They're all clinking glasses of whiskey, and they're sitting there watching this damn thing for 45 minutes, right? And now when the papers start printing out, they're like, oh, if we had to wait 45 seconds for something today, I'm punching my keyboard so hard, keys are flying off. We're impatient because and it's not, I'm not saying that as a negative, it's the way technology has kind of groomed us. We're used to things being immediate and fast. And when they're not, we're impatient. So I think that also kind of lends itself to communications. If there's a pause, people get irritated. Like, why are you taking so long? Why is there a pause? And I'm like, be comfortable with it. You know, it's okay.
Like just that. So everyone's aware, there's a duck mask that you can get, because I saw a guy at the grocery store with it over the weekend, and it's pretty much the least threatening thing I've ever seen.
Does it actually have a beak?
It is like a beak, yeah. So it's like two separate parts, and I just kept staring at it and was like, that's amazing.
Yeah. That would be very non-threatening.
Yeah. You mentioned the story about the security guard who was the best security guard ever. I love that story, and it made me wonder, because you said you went back and kind of told, you know, that company, if everyone was as good as this guy and he trained everyone, then it would be obviously amazing. What are some of the reactions you get to your findings? I mean, do you commend people, and then does the company typically say, oh wow, like that's really great, or are they kind of like nonchalant about the good things and only focus on the bad things? Or how do your reactions, how do they come along?
That's a really good question. You know, I think that's up to the security professional to set that up and stage it appropriately before the job. So I'll give you an example. When we're having our introductory meetings, and we haven't even signed an SOW yet, we're just talking about what services you want. I'm asking the client, what is the resultant of our work? Like, what happens to people that fail, and what happens to people that we find that succeed? Now, by asking that question way in advance, most of the time, I'll say 98% of the time, a company will go, you know, we haven't thought about that. What do you suggest? What do other companies do? And that now gives me the opportunity. Like, think about it. The whole thing's a big SE engagement, right? So now that gives me the opportunity to say to them, oh, when we find people who really beat us, like they stop us dead, here's some of the suggestions we have for rewarding. And when we find people who really fail, unless they're doing something illegal or company damaging, we suggest education. And that gives us a moment to talk about that. And I'll tell you, we've had a couple experiences where a company has said to us, well, anyone who fails this, they're probably going to be up for disciplinary action. And I said, well, what's the disciplinary action? And they said, well, it could lead to their firing. And I'm like, we don't want the job. Mm-hmm. I'm like, do you understand that right now our average success ratio is 72% when we are vishing? It's 72% success. And we're talking date of birth, social security numbers, employee IDs, bank account numbers. We're 72% successful. So we say to them, if you want to fire 72% of your people, then sure, we can talk about that, but you're looking at some major pain. So how are you going to pick out who you're going to fire? So we say, and then you fire these 3 people, and you have to replace them with 3 new people. And guess what? Those 3 new people are just as vulnerable as the 3 people you just fired. So what do you plan on doing? Having a revolving door? And most of the time, the companies will go, oh yeah, that's a good point. Now, there are caveats to that, right? If you've tried to train your people 3-4 years in a row and they're just not getting it, they're clicking on everything and they're constantly creating a havoc for your company, and maybe there's a potential breach because of something they did that's not smart, I get it. Okay, you may need to then consider that person as a threat to your company, but let's not make that the first action that occurs.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome that you set it up like that and give them kind of like the ideas of what to do afterwards before you even start. Because I could see a lot of people just flipping out, right? And be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Not realizing, I guess, how good you actually are, you know?
Yeah, and it's just human nature, because the thing that I found also, and this happened early on in my owning my own business as a career, is I was stuck in the mindset that we see in this industry often, which is you always have to win at any cost. And it hit me at one point that attitude is really damaging to the client. Because imagine if you went to a doctor for a problem and the doctor said, it doesn't matter how much you pay me, you're always going to have this problem and then you're going to die. That's not very, like, then why pay you? Why put any money towards this, right?
Yeah.
And a pen tester that says, we always win 100% of the time, you never win, you fail, then why do the service, right? So we started saying, well, what's the reasoning for this? And it comes up to this phrase that one of the women that work for me, she's writing this book now, it's called Attacker Mindset. And it's understanding how an attacker thinks, but also realizing that I'm not the bad guy. So although I need to know how the bad guys think, there should be limitations to what I do, right? A bad guy will kidnap your kids. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
A bad guy would use nude or risque photos they find of you to humiliate you. I'm not going to do that. A bad guy would threaten you with firing or physical harm. I'm not going to do that. I can understand where that vector can come from, and I can inform clients, hey, this may be used against you because we found this, this, and this, but I don't need to do it just to prove the point.
Mm-hmm.
So by using positive-based pretexts, I usually make it easier for employees to accept training, as opposed to having to use things that I know will always let me win, but it leaves everyone feeling worse for having met me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that also brings me to ask about the engagement you mentioned, where you and your business partner like set up kind of the organization and made people feel bad for her when you like yelled at her. And I didn't really think about it at first as like, of course you're going to have to go back and tell the company how you managed to get all the signatures, right? So yeah, I could see how
I didn't think about it either.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it until I had to do it. Then it was really bad.
So
I got there yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, so for anyone who hasn't read that part yet, Chris, do you want to kind of just explain briefly what that part was about?
No, but I will. I hate this story. It's the worst story. No, it's okay. It's good for me to constantly say it because it makes me feel crappy about having ever done it. So it's a good reminder. Again, it was early on in my career, and I was in this mentality of always having to win. And this company hired us for everything. It was phishing, vishing, and physical entry. We even were doing USB keys. And every step of the way, this company stopped us. We sent a phishing email. We got a click. That person reported it. They automatically blocked all egress and ingress from that domain. I mean, it was like minutes, and we were shut down. That happened multiple fish, right, where we got stopped. Vishing, I could not get anyone to give us anything confidential that we can use. We got stopped every type of entryway possible physically. At that point, I should have ended the test, maybe told the company, hey, I have a few ideas how you can improve, or we can try something more hardcore next year, and just congratulated them for amazing wins. But instead, I let my ego get the best of me. So this company had like 3 buildings that came together. In the middle was an atrium for an outdoor lunch area. And we set it up so this woman that was working with me, we set it up so she's in the back and she's holding her stack of papers, and I'm supposed to be the one of the people in HR, and she works for me. So we wait for the lunchroom to get filled, and then I walk up to her like I'm really angry, like, Beth, what the hell? Where's my forms? And she says, I totally forgot. I didn't get them. And I freak out on her. I call her a bitch. I'd say terrible things. It really was bad. And and then I storm off, and these two guys come running after me like they're gonna kick my butt, right? You know, they're like they are not pleased with that scene, and rightfully so. And then she steps in, oh, like perfect Stockholm syndrome, like, no, please don't go after him. He's just having a rough time at home. He's going through a divorce. It's my fault. I should have done the job better. And of course, that type of, you know, knight in shining armor empathetic response is going to get people now to shut down all critical thinking. So the eventual resultant was that she got, 125 people to fill out these forms with their full name, email address, their department, their social security number, and their date of birth for an HR rollout program. It felt great at the moment until I start to realize that I have to go tell this company what I did. And I am not Chris Hadnagy. I am the abusive jerk that they all saw in the lunchroom. And it was that incident that made me come back to the company and said, we have to change everything we're doing. Our winning should not be at the cost of our own consciences and morals or that of our clients. So, and that was a pivotal moment where the leave them feeling better for having met you methodology came to life, and that became literally the core of our code of ethics and the way that we conduct all of our business after that.
It's a great learning opportunity, that's for sure. Thanks for sharing it with everyone.
It is.
I had another question. If anybody else has any, feel free to speak up and unmute yourself. But you mentioned the DISC a lot. Was there any other like tests or things you've used in the past, like existing tests like the Strengths Finders or anything? I know there's like some that are already out there, but this is new for me. So I was just curious if you came up with it yourself or.
No. So DISC was actually made by William Marston. He is a very famous psychologist from the 1930s. He actually had three degrees from Harvard. He was a lawyer, an inventor. He actually created the polygraph and doing a scientific study about the effect of lying on people's blood pressure. And also, oddly enough, he was the creator of Wonder Woman. He was a big feminist for his time, and he thought we needed a superhero that was all the strength of Superman, but that had all the femininity of a powerful woman. This is 1930, so you could imagine what he was like then. And he created a communications profiling tool in a 1932 book that he wrote, which is still referenced today. And that work has been, of course, worked on for decades and improved. And the science behind it is now pretty solid. Now, the reason I don't use some of the others you mentioned is because what I was looking for is a tool that can be taught to anyone fast and that can be utilized on the spot. And, if anyone here has taken the Myers-Briggs, then it's impossible for me to look at this room of people and go, you're an INTJ. No one can do that. It's not, you can't do that just by small observation. So DISC is something that with minimal input, even just a picture on Twitter, 180 characters, I can usually profile a person with their communication profile. It is not a psychological profile. It is merely about how they like to take in and receive and give information, which then allows me, because our job is all about communication, to communicate in a method that you will feel more amiable to complying with whatever it is I'm asking.
Yeah, and I thought that the examples you gave of like celebrities or public figures was really good because that's easy for everyone to think about, right? But You're right. Once I heard all of them, I was like, okay, I know exactly which one I am.
Yeah.
Like, immediately, right? You don't even have to think about it. So that's pretty awesome. Micah posted a question in the chat. He said, how much validity is there to the old adage of a clipboard is all you need to get into any facility?
Oh,
and I don't think he's read too far into the book, so I know
that's okay.
There's some clipboard stories. But
a clipboard is like that is literally one of the most powerful tools a social engineer can have. I use a clipboard more than I use anything else. There was something about having a clipboard. That was Brandon.
Oh, sorry.
There was something about having a clipboard that makes you invisible. It really does. People just automatically assume you must belong because of a clipboard. So there is a lot of validity to that. A clipboard and the right outfit, man, I've gotten into so many secure locations. It's not even funny.
Well, like you talk about, for the waste management one, and that's Micah referenced that. Sorry, I got them mixed up. But for the waste management role that you took on, how much did you learn about like the compactor or whatever? Like, how much random knowledge do you have just by looking things up?
Yeah. So we went and we used Google Street View, and we got the exact model of their trash compactor. And then I went to the waste management site and I downloaded all the blueprints and schematics for that trash compactor because I needed to know where the internal crushing motor was. So if someone actually escorted me and they knew it, I would go to the right spot on the compactor to find the serial number on the motor. So, I can now walk up to a 54-ton trash compactor and show you where your serial number is on a crushing motor, but that's about all I know about it. I didn't go any further, and I oftentimes will make sure my pre-texts do not require me to have special knowledge because I miserably failed one time trying to make believe I knew more than I did, and that shut me down really bad. So I usually try, like with that the trash compactor one, I went in and said, I'm not the repair guy. I just get sent out to check serial numbers against my list. And if your number's in my list, then we have to replace it. But if not, you're all safe. So I make sure they know I don't know anything about this. So if they go, hey, it just broke, can you fix it? Nah, man, I'm literally just a number checker, right? So I make it so I don't have to be smarter than I am because I oftentimes know very little about a lot. So I'm like, I don't want to make believe I have to know things.
I feel like you could go be an actor at any moment.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm good at acting, but maybe. I don't know. I should try it sometime. Maybe.
They're like, here's a role, learn some stuff about it. Let's go. It was funny because you kept mentioning the psychologist Simon Baron Cohen, and I had to like keep rewinding it because I'm listening to the audiobook, and I was like, Sacha Baron Cohen has what to do with this? I was like, wait a minute. Okay.
I had a question. I was just, Chris, you mentioned that you, there was one time where you pretended like you knew more than you actually did, and it kind of got you. So could you go into more detail on that?
Yeah. Oh boy, another one of my fail stories. So we got hired to break into this university. Their servers were all in the basement of their math and science building. So we had scoped out the building, a couple days in advance. Just sat in a creepy van, took pictures, trying to see like what our end would be. It was a pretty open campus, but there just was no way for us to spend time picking a lock without someone seeing us. And this had to be done in broad daylight. That was part of the scope. So we couldn't come at the dead of night and break in. And that would have made it easy, but we couldn't do that. So we noticed that for the 2 days we observed that there's this professor that walks to the building to go grade paper, something early in the morning, like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. He's walking towards the building and he goes in. So we went and OSINTed the professor and found that he was a professor in physics, and he wrote a paper on quantum physics. Now, I can barely spell quantum physics, but in my youth, I thought this will be a great pretext. I will walk up to him and say, we should have a conversation about your paper on quantum physics. And then as he's talking, I will just like, wow, that's fascinating. And I will walk in the building with him and part ways and go down to the servers and hack the universe. And instead, here's how it went. I walked up to him. I said, hey, professor, I want to talk to you about your paper on quantum physics. And he stops and he goes, oh, excellent. What do you want to talk about? And I'm like, the paper. And he's like, yeah, but what part? What do you want to discuss about the paper? And I'm like, quantum physics. That's interesting. And he's like, is this some kind of joke? Are you pulling a prank? And I'm like, no, it's not a prank. I was really curious. He's like, then why don't you go read the paper and then come back and talk to me? And he just like stormed off and there was nothing. And I'm like left in the dust. I'm like, dang it, the heck. Like it literally was, I didn't know anything about quantum physics and I never read the paper. So there was like him saying, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I don't know. And I literally looked like that, like, I don't know. The quantum physics is really cool, right? And I'm doing the finger thing, and it's like, look back at that, like, how dumb can you be? So, yeah, so that happened. That's an actual story in my real life. Yeah.
Amazing. I had another question. So I found it interesting that you have the signature page at the front before you start reading, but it doesn't go anywhere and no one ever sees it. So do you think it's like a mental, people sign it and then they're like, I have to do it because I signed it?
It is. You know what? So I worked with a writer to write this, and this was the first time he ever worked on a publication of this material. And at the end of the book, he said, aren't you worried that people can use this to do some really bad things to really honest people? And I said, that's always a fear of mine. I go, but it's kind of like a knife manufacturer. They make great knives to be a chef. They'd hope no one's going to take that knife and murder someone, but someone may. I mean, it's a gun manufacturer. They make a gun so you can go hunting. They hope that no one's going to go and commit a murder, but people may. A car manufacturer, same thing. They're not making cars for hit and runs, but that happens at times. So I said, this knowledge needs to be out there because we are in a time in the digital world where we are isolated more than ever before. Depression is at an all-time high, and we have lost the ability as a society to be disagreeing without being disagreeable. If I disagree with a belief you have, somehow we have to hate each other now. And I don't understand that. We don't have to believe the same way so we can be friends, even. I don't have to hate you because you like something I don't like. And it seems like we've lost that ability, and the anonymity of the internet has made it so people feel emboldened to say horrible things to other humans, racist, sexist, misogynistic things that you would never say to a person's face, right? Like this is the least of it, but I gave a TEDx talk, and there's a guy on the page who will not stop talking about how fat I am, right? And it's like horrible, but it's like this guy would probably never say that to my face, but he's empowered to say it. And no matter how many people stick up for me, this guy is emboldened to cut them all down. And it's like, and we've lost this ability to communicate in an empathetic and compassionate way. So the sign page in the beginning was really thought up by my ghostwriter when he said, what do you think about making people promise that they won't? And I'm like, that has some validity to it. Like psychology actually teaches us, like in some high schools, they have kids sign clauses that they won't do drugs or they won't start smoking or things like that. And for a lot of kids, it does something to you. Like I signed this piece of paper, like this is a contract. So my thought was, okay, let's put this in the beginning of the book. And when people read it and sign their name to it, I have no way of enforcing it. But I'm hoping that your conscience might actually enforce to not use these skills in a malicious way, because you really could. I mean, there's a whole industry called the pickup artist industry where guys teach other guys how to use this stuff as a manipulator against women. And it's horrific. It's a horrific industry, in my opinion, because it preys on the insecurities of women. It preys on any weakness that they may have, and it utilizes it for one purpose, and that's sex. So it's very, very predatory. It's the same skills. So just don't use it that way. Be committed to being a good person, and you can have an amazing life and an amazing career, and you don't have to be an a-hole about it. So, like you can win friends and influence people, right?
Yeah, and that brings me to one more question, which is, do you think that some of the tactics work better if you're a man or a woman? Like I've heard people mention, like it's so much easier to like social engineer, if you're a woman, because we can just like send you in and we can get you like a fake pregnant belly and you can just like go in there and ask somebody to open the door for you and all that. So
70% of my company is women.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably like one of the few IT companies that hire mostly women. Mm-hmm. Your gender is much better at this job, just much better. I mean, So there's a few things, and it's wrong for anyone to say, well, it's just because you're women. There's a few things. Women naturally have the best quality naturally that men often do not, and that's ego suspension. And I don't know if that's societal or if that's biological, but most women have a natural inclination towards suspending their ego over being arrogant, and men don't. They have to work on that. And that is such a beautiful quality for a social engineer because it works on everybody, male or female. Second, the women have a softer tone to their voice that makes it easier for the brain to accept you as non-threatening. And then this is a bias, but we have to play on it. Most people, both men and women, think that it's impossible for a woman to be that malicious. Even though there are some women serial killers and some women criminals, it is often not the case. So we are biased to think that, well, those 4 questions, of course you're not a threat. Look at you. What do you weigh? 105 pounds? I can curl you. So you can't be a threat. Now that's a wrong thinking, right? Because it's not always about physical threat, because you, at the same time that, yeah, you're maybe not a physical threat, but you've already got my social and all my credit cards, so that's a bigger threat than you shanking me in the liver. So, it doesn't really matter. But those things bias us to be more accepting of women. And then you just do a better job at suspending your ego and being inquisitive and asking questions, which is such a natural part of being a social engineer. Your qualities make you a better fit for this job than men. We have to work harder at the things that you will get naturally.
There you go. So if any of you ladies want to be a social engineer, you
Call
heard
me.
it here first.
Call me. Well, we might be hiring soon. We love hiring women. Actually, my senior team leader, she's amazing. This woman, she was a stunt driver for Paramount.
What?
She is one of the world's 7 only underwater robotic submarine operators.
What?
It was a model for a while. She got bored and went through school to get a degree in quantum computing. Then she went to Australia to be a social engineer to break into banks, and then realized that's what she wanted to do and called me and asked me for a job. I thought I was being catfished. I mean, this woman is a genius, and she's ridiculously beautiful and accomplished. And I'm like, you're not real. You don't exist in a reality. Like, this is a catfish, and she was a real person. And she now is our senior team leader.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, and it's like she leads a team, and they go break into places, and with a couple other women, and they're unstoppable. You can't stop them. Everyone holds doors open for her. It's just idiotic. It's like, it's unbelievable.
Casey, did you have any last comments?
I do not. I'm looking forward to finishing the book, though. I mean, I have, I think, 5 chapters left. 50% of the audiobook was at the end of chapter 4, so that's where I stopped.
Thank you for reading it. I look forward to your feedback on that.
Yeah, the audiobook's great. I've enjoyed listening to it as well. So
high quality audiobook.
So to wrap it up, Chris, what's some advice you would leave all of our listeners with?
Oh, advice. Not to be on a soapbox, but I think we're in a time in human history where we've lost some empathy, and it's not all our fault. Media has made it so we're so used to seeing another catastrophe, another terror attack, another suicide, another school shooting, that our brains now don't process it as sad news anymore. And that makes us lose the ability to have empathy. They did a study recently that also talked about certain types of plastic surgery, like Botox, which works by deadening the muscles in your face, actually has created a stream of sociopathic mothers. Because if you can't show empathy to your children because you can't show sadness, then they will grow up more sociopathic than before. So we're in a weird time in human history. So I think my advice would be is whatever it is that you are going to do with your life or career, do it with compassion and empathy. Do it not thinking about just what you want out of life. And it's not just a platitude to say, oh, and it will come back to you. I'm really not going to say that, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can do great things for people. I've had this experience in my company. I've done great things for people, held out the red carpet for them, and they leave and screw you. And it happens. It's okay. That shouldn't stop you from being a great person to the next person, because it's a thing that could change us. And I'm not here to change the world. Right? I don't believe I can or have the capacity to, but if I can change my family, and my family can change my small corner of my community, and that small corner of community can change their small corners of communities, who knows what we can accomplish, right? When I started SE Village at DEF CON 11 years ago, we were in the center of a place that was filled with some of the most malicious people on the planet. And now we have a 13,000 square foot room that's filled with everybody, and nobody uses curse words, and there's no porn on the walls, and nobody's endangered, and people drop their wallets and it gets turned in. And that's great. So I'm not looking to change the whole conference. Let's change one little space, and let's make it a better place. So focus on that. And whether you're going to be an InfoSec, a social engineer, or anything else, you can have an awesome time doing it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris.
You're
It's
welcome.
a pleasure having you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Please finish reading Human Hacking. We'll talk about it again in 2 weeks, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye,
Nice
everyone.
meeting you all.
You too.
You too. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.